So, cool. So this story is called A Gender Fluid Icon. And this first, I guess, kind of pseudo chapter is called The Plan. For as long as I can remember, I've had a crush on Blaze Zabini. I can't remember when it started. Blaze had always been good looking, and every time I saw them, my heart did somersaults in my chest. They were well known around Hogwarts for their stunningly good looks, but beyond the exterior, the Slytherin was rather mysterious. The mystique may have been the appeal for some, but I was desperate to know more. All I wanted was to know the true Blaze Zabini. Well, that and snog them senseless. As I sat on my bed in my dormitory, I began my nightly ritual of fantasizing about Blaze. Suddenly, a voice disrupted my train of thought. Thinking about Blaze again, are you? Lavender smirked at me from her bed. As my best friend at Hogwarts, she was all too aware of my crush on Blaze. Apparently, she'd found out after I'd mumbled their name in my sleep. I'm still not convinced she didn't read my diary. I don't know what to do, Lavender, I whined into my pillow. They don't even know I exist. My attempts to gain the attention of Hogwarts' most sought-after individual were embarrassingly unsuccessful. It was difficult to find the opportunity to speak to Blaze, and when I finally managed to get near them, I lost my ability to form coherent sentences. Lavender continued to smirk at me. I may have a suggestion. What? I shot up off the bed and walked over to hers. What can I possibly do? I don't know anything about Blaze, let alone who they'd be into. That's why you need to conduct some research, Lavender said simply. You need to go around and talk to people who know them. Research? Other than being ridiculously hot, the main thing that everyone knows about Blaze Zabini is that they are the only out student at Hogwarts who identifies as gender fluid. And how is that meant to help me? I raised my eyebrows at her. If you let me finish, Lavender snapped at me, you'd know that I've just taken over as the editor of the Hogwarts Hearsay. As a matter of public interest, I've assigned you the task of writing a profile feature on Blaze Zabini. I considered this for a moment. The Hogwarts Hearsay was an underground gossip magazine at Hogwarts. No one knows how it started or how they got their tips for their stories. It also wasn't common knowledge who the editor was. For Lavender to be the editor, she must have been writing for the magazine for some time. Somehow she'd managed to keep her writing and the gossip she'd uncovered secret from me. While part of myself was curious about the secrets Lavender might have rolling around in her head, this was too good an opportunity to pass up. If I was ever going to get Blaze to like me, I needed to know as much as I could before I put the moves on them. That could work, although I'll have to tell the people I'm interviewing that I'm writing an article as a cover. Not all the articles are anonymous, Lavender rolled her eyes at me. It's the perfect plan. I get a feature on the school's most desired heartthrob, and you get to dig up dirt so you can win the affections of the aforementioned heartthrob. 2 owls, 1 stone. You're the best, I squeal and hug Lavender before returning excitedly to my bed. Lavender sighed a little before pulling her blanket up. You're welcome, Parvati. Chapter thingy 2. The Dirt. Unsurprisingly, Blaze was not the easiest person to track down information about. Everyone outside of 6th year would either giggle about how attractive Blaze was or boast about how they could be the one to snag them. Even the 6th years themselves didn't know much about Blaze. Harry and Hermione said they knew them from Slughorn's Club, but that was the extent of what they knew about Blaze. That was the extent of what was known about Blaze in my own house. The Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs weren't any help either. So I regrettably had to narrow my research down to the Slytherins. I decided to start with the Slytherin prince himself. Not that I was expecting much out of Draco Malfoy. Don't you have anyone else to be writing about, Patil? Draco drawled at me, his feet up on a table in the corner of the library. I'm rather interesting myself, you know. I reiterated to Malfoy that I was only looking for information about Blaise, and almost instantly I felt meaty hands on my arms. Malfoy chuckled from his table as Crabbe and Goyle pulled me away. I tried to ask for their thoughts on Blaise, but they gave me their standard grunt as I was pushed out of the library. None of the other Slytherins in our years seemed keen to talk about them either. Daphne Greengrass merely offered me a scowl, Millicent Bulstrode threatened to put poison in my pumpkin juice, and Theodore Nott ran away from me every time I approached him. Becoming desperate, I approached Pansy Parkinson for her thoughts on Blaise. I found her lounging under a tree near the lake. She was tanning in the unseasonably sunny weather while reading the latest edition of Witch Weekly. Blaise is a gender-fluid icon, Pansy gushed when I mentioned their name. You could almost see her eyes turn heart-shaped. When they came out as gender-fluid last year, I was so inspired, of course, but I just had to check that I was still in with a chance to date them, and they confirmed that they were fluid with their sexuality as well, and it just made me like them even more, you know. They are so bloody hot. And those eyes of theirs, you could just melt in, and when they wear those tight pants. Pansy shuddered and waved a hand around her face to fan herself. Abruptly, she remembered who she was speaking with and narrowed her eyes at me. What's it to you anyway, Patil? She demanded. This is a strictly professional discussion, I answered evenly, trying to paint myself as an objective writer, when I was really as love-struck as she was. I believe it's my duty to inform Hogwarts of the real Blaise Zabini. Pansy visibly relaxed. Oh, that's fine then. I could talk about Blaise all day. She returned to her dreamy demeanor. What do you want to know? Without prompting, Pansy began to describe her dream date with Blaise. Sparing no details, she imagined Blaise escorting her to a 5-star restaurant, kissing her under the stars, and announcing their engagement the following day. Pansy, I interrupted, needing to see if she had anything of substance for my research. She was the first person willing to talk to me, and I couldn't waste this opportunity. Can you tell me something about Blaise that not many other people would know? Of course I can, Pansy boasted. I follow Blaise around all the time, and I know everything. Did you know they dated Draco Malfoy last year? Really? Yes, Draco was really into them, but Blaise saw Draco as more of an easy shag. Draco was furious because the Beanies are wealthier than the Malfoys. Could you imagine how grand their wedding would have been? I imagine it would have been the wedding of the decade. Well, it didn't work out, obviously, and Draco has been acting like a git to Blaise ever since, although Blaise doesn't appear to let it bother them. Has Blaise dated anyone since? I asked Pansy curiously. Well, I have seen them sneaking out of the dormitory a few times over the last term, but I have no idea where they go. I tried to follow once, but Blaise caught me and hit me with a stunning spell. Pansy sighed despondently. Professor Snape came and revived me before he went after Blaise. Pansy continued to go on about Blaise's physical attributes for some time before I thanked her and walked away with renewed enthusiasm for my research. Naturally, the conversation I had with Pansy led me to only one person. Professor Snape? I shamelessly walked up to his desk after Defense Against the Dark Arts. Can I ask you something? Is it relevant to the teaching material, Patil? If it is, you had ample time to ask questions in class. The professor gathered his things and moved towards the door. Professor, I'm worried about Blaise Zabini. Professor Snape paused and turned to look at me. What has brought about this concern? I've heard they're sneaking out of the Slytherin common room, and I don't think it's right that they're out of bed all the time. Professor Snape narrowed his eyes at me. Patel, I do not care for your games. The number of vacuous students attempting to gather information on Zabini's private life is ridiculous. I will manage any rule breaking without your interference. Ask me again and you'll be in detention. Professor Snape stormed out of the room and slammed the door behind him. Chapter 3. Caught Out. Lavender! I flopped onto my bed for dramatic effect. I'm not getting anywhere with this Blaise research. I don't think anything I've found out is going to help me win over Blaise. It's really not even enough to write an article. Well, you found out from Pansy that Blaise was sneaking out of the common room at night, correct? I'm not a Slytherin. I can't just hang out in the common room and see if they sneak out. Lavender just stared at me. No, but you can wait outside of it. So I began to spend my nights outside the Slytherin common room. I hid myself with a disillusionment charm in case anyone came past. I sat for hours on the freezing stone of the dungeon floor, waiting for Blaise to sneak out. I persisted for several nights with no results, until finally I saw Blaise sneak out of the stone wall that the Slytherin common room was hidden behind. They looked both ways and soundlessly rushed down the hall. Blaise wove through the castle, going up several flights of stairs and racing around corners. I followed silently, crossing my fingers that I didn't trip over my feet in my haste. They stopped at an entrance to an unused classroom, and again looked both ways before stepping inside. I followed closely behind, sucking my stomach in and holding my breath. Blaise stood in the middle of the classroom, clearly waiting for something. 30 seconds later, the door swung open, revealing who Blaise was waiting for. I'm so excited! Zacharias Smith stood in the doorway. He stared at Blaise for a moment, quietly shut the door, and then, not so quietly, launched himself at Blaise. I felt myself seize up in horror. Zacharias Smith and Blaise Zabini were a thing? Blaise caught Zacharias and the two began to make out furiously, collapsing to the floor in a pile of limbs. I covered my eyes as clothes were quickly removed. I realized this was way more than I had bargained for and headed to the door. I ran out of the room and heard the door slam as I sprinted away. What the fuck was that? I heard Zacharias hiss, and I pulled up at the end of the corridor. While following my instinctive need to flee, I'd forgotten that I was perfectly capable of making noise. I glanced behind me and saw Zacharias poking his head out of the door, pulling his pajama top over his head. The image of the two of them was burnt into my mind as I headed back to the common room. I could not believe that Blaise was snogging Zacharias Smith. Smith was the biggest git in the school. Blaise surely had better taste than him. I removed the disillusionment charm, and after a chastising from the fat lady, I went straight to bed. My head was spinning with confusion as I pulled the covers over me. Parvati, I heard Lavender walk towards me. What happened? I felt the mattress dip slightly as she sat down on the edge of my bed. When I didn't respond, she put a hand on my shoulder and shook it slightly. What happened? I saw who Blaise is involved with, my voice muffled by my pillow. Who? Zacharias Smith. Oh, Lavender said, her voice monotone. Her hand lingered for a moment before she pulled it away from my shoulder. I pulled the covers away to look up into her eyes. You don't sound surprised. Lavender was silent as her eyes darted away from my face, looking anywhere but at me. I sat up in my bed, putting my back against the headboard. You knew, didn't you? It dawned on me suddenly. You knew Blaise was going out with Smith. Another moment of silence. Lavender stood up and brushed her hands over her pajamas. Why wouldn't you just tell me? I demanded of her, instead of sending me on some wild chase around the school. You needed to see it for yourself. Lavender turned her back on me and walked over to her bed, pulling the curtain shut around her. I felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest and stomped on by a giant. The person I liked was seeing someone else, and that someone else was a pretentious prick. Between Zacharias and Draco, Blaze appeared to have a penchant for blonde assholes, something which I certainly did not fit the description of. To top it all off, my best friend had lied to me about someone she knew I had a crush on. My best friend, who I always confided in, clearly didn't feel the need to reciprocate. I was beginning to feel like I didn't know her at all, and that pain hurt most of all. The next chapter, the confrontation. A few uneventful days passed after witnessing the horror that was Blaze and Zacharias ripping each other's clothes off. I avoided Lavender as much as possible and spent most of my time in the library with Padma and her Ravenclaw friends. Unfortunately, my avoidance tactics didn't work for long. I knew I was heading for a disaster when I saw Blaze storm up to me in the entrance to the Great Hall. Patil! Why are you going around asking questions about me? Blaze was infuriated, yet somehow still looked stunning in their tight pants and button-up shirt. Their hair was pushed back from their face, and their eyes, although full of anger, could cause hearts to melt. My heart, however, was newly immune to their charm. My stomach was in knots as they spoke, but I wanted to defend myself and the Hogwarts hearsay. Even if she'd encouraged me, it wasn't Lavender's fault that I'd gone overboard with my investigation. I'm simply doing my job, I sighed. As a writer, I was asked to report on the issues that interest the students of Hogwarts. As Hogwarts' own gender-fluid icon, it's well within the interests of the Hogwarts student body to write about you. Evidently, this was not the answer Blaze was after, and they began to yell, attracting the attention of the occupants in the Great Hall. You're a bloody stalker, Patil! I know it was you who snuck in and saw Zach and I in the classroom! Blaze's eyes stared down into mine. I opened my mouth to try and defuse the situation, but Blaze continued to scream. Would you and everyone else in this bloody school just leave me alone? My sexual life is none of your fucking business, and I don't appreciate being badgered under the guise of being of interest to the readers of a gossipy rag. Blaze huffed and folded their arms across their chest protectively. Blaze, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm not doing this because of you, I stated in a quieter tone. I'm doing it because it's in the public interest. Blaze let out a screech and waved their hands around as if they were struggling to form a reply. Behind them, I saw Zacharias approach us with a sneer. He put a hand on Blaze's shoulder and looked over at me. You come anywhere near us again, Patil, and I will hex you into oblivion. Blaze is not interested in you or your rubbish excuses, he snapped, and stop harassing our friends. Zacharias pulled Blaze from the hall, the eyes of the student body upon them. I stood there for a moment. I suppose I really did deserve the dressing down for snooping around about them, but how had they known who'd slammed the door? I decided to risk my safety and ran down the hall after them. Blaze, I called out. Wait a second. Zacharias stood protectively in front of Blaze. You have 3 seconds before I start firing hexes, Patil, he snarled and pulled out his wand. I just want to know how you knew it was me the other night, I stammered out. Admitting my guilt to the couple made me feel a little lighter. I'd lost the desire to defend myself now we were speaking privately. Zacharias lowered his wand and grabbed Blaze's hand, moving to stand beside them. You don't know? Blaze asked me inquisitively. No. I tilted my head to the side and tried to think. The only person who knew I was out following Blaze was Lavender. Blaze nodded in confirmation. Why is she being like this? I asked bewilderedly. She's supposed to be my friend and now she hates me. Blaze and Zacharias shared a look. They appeared to have a nonverbal conversation before turning back to me. Patil, Blaze spoke slowly as if they were talking to a child. We've been sources for the Hogwarts hearsay for quite a while now, and we know Lavender rather well. Trust me, she doesn't hate you. She doesn't shut up about you, to be honest, Zacharias continued. It's rather annoying. But why would she encourage me to chase you around and then lie to me if she doesn't hate me? She wanted me to find out you two were dating, and she's been keeping things from me. Zacharias rolled his eyes. Think about it, Patil. She wanted you to realize that Blaze wasn't available. And Zacharias's eyes were continuously rolling by this point. Here, let's do a couple more. She told Blaze that you had been following them and asking personal questions from their friends so you'd look bad. So you're saying she didn't want any chance of Blaze and I getting together? They both nodded. But why? Zacharias grew even more agitated. Merlin, you are thick, Patil! I went to shoot back a response before it dawned on me. I spun on my heel and ran away from the couple. Thanks! I shouted over my shoulder. I had to find Lavender. The next chapter, the happy ending. I found Lavender sitting in the common room staring into the fireplace. She'd laid her divination homework in front of her, but by looking at the blank parchment, she hadn't made much progress. Lavender? She turned around suddenly. Parvati! She clutched at her heart. You scared me! Can we go for a walk? I think we need to talk. Half an hour later, Lavender and I were walking around the lake in silence. A cold breeze blew across the grounds, and I wrapped my robes tighter around me. I spoke to Blaze this morning, I began. You've probably heard about that. I imagine the whole school has by this point. They yelled at me, and I tried to defend myself in the hearsay, but I deserved it. I was stupid to think that interrogating someone's friends and then stalking them was going to get them to like me. I stopped walking and my eyes met Lavender's. I should have been honest with them from the start. It's scary to tell someone you like them. I spent this last month running around the school for Blaze, but if I'd actually just sat down and spoken with them, I would have found out much sooner that they really aren't the kind of person I'm interested in. I'm beginning to think that it's worth the risk to just be honest. You never know how someone might feel about you. Lavender's eyes broke away from mine as I was speaking. Come on, I smiled at her teasingly. You're a Gryffindor. Take the risk. Lavender choked on her words. I like you, Parvati, but I know you liked Blaze, and just because they're with Zacharias, I didn't expect you to like me back. I know what I did was stupid and selfish, and I smashed my lips to hers to shut her up. We kissed for a moment before she pulled back. I don't want a pity kiss, Parvati, Lavender muttered miserably. It wasn't a pity kiss. It was an I'm an idiot and I can't believe what I've been missing out on kiss. How could someone I don't even know compare to you? You should have told me sooner. She kissed me this time. Her mouth was warm on mine, and I felt her cool fingers in my hair as she pulled me closer. We're idiots, she said breathlessly. We could have been doing this for years. And she smashed our faces together again. All other thoughts left my mind as we continued to snog on the freezing Hogwarts grounds. Who needed a gender-fluid icon when you could have Lavender Brown? The end.